All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Never Too Late podcast. I've got an awesome guest for you today in Mr. Jason Pierret. How's it going, Jason?
Yeah, it's going well, Anthony. How are you?
Pretty good. The first thing I would like to start with in these things is just have you introduce yourself, who you are, and what you do.
Yeah. So my name is Jason Pierret. I am founder and a fractional executive at an advisory and consulting firm called Alpha Brand. My company, Alpha Brand, is just that, fractional consulting, advisory. Essentially what we do is we collaborate with companies who are looking for additional values-driven leadership on a project basis. So if you're a company who maybe is new to the game, or maybe you're someone who's been around for a little while and you're looking to infuse sales and marketing strategy at a caliber that you typically would have to pay much more for if you brought that person on staff full time, that's what we do.
Okay. Yeah. So when I hear fractional, I hear like a lot lately about fractional CMOs, fractional CFOs, that kind of thing. So you're doing that on like a sales marketing strategy kind of level.
Yeah. So a little bit of my background, and we may dive into this, in the podcast and whatever, but for the past 20 years or so, I actually have been an executive and in sales and in marketing. I've had the opportunity to build high caliber and high performing sales and marketing teams. And so I've done that for other companies for quite some time, right? Like on the payroll and consistently kind of that was what I did. And I when you work for other companies, you're helping somebody else build their dream. And so I like that aspect of it, but I also like being able to take control of my own dream. And so it's kind of cool to get to help other companies build their own dreams, but to do that while also building mine. It's a pretty neat kind of intersection. And so that's why I do what I do.
Yeah, man, you're speaking my language there. That's the whole core mission of Never Too Late Enterprises to begin with is, we've all got our own lives we got to live and build a future for and all this, but yeah, at the end of the day, if you can't find a way to do that while helping as many people as possible, in my estimation anyways, it really isn't worth the effort. So,
Yeah, completely agree.
Awesome. So you said you've been doing this for a long time, like 20 plus years, right?
Yeah.
So who were you and what were you before all that? Was that like fresh out of college or you got some crazy backstory?
Yeah, no, definitely not a crazy backstory. I'll give you a kind of how I got into it, right? So as I was growing up, my father was always really successful, right? And at least to me as a kid, and then, come to find out as an adult, like he was actually really successful. And so I always watched him and I admired him and really just loved how authentic he was about who he was and the things that he did. My father worked for the same company, I think for 30, maybe almost 40 years, which is kind of unheard of nowadays. And he was a real estate developer before he retired just a few years ago. And I just watched how he did business. And I always wanted to be the one who was riding in the car when he took a phone call, because that kind of stuff was just always really interesting to me. And I would say that my father is my role model for sure. So anyways, back into the story though. So I watched him be extremely successful and I was really inspired by that. And so as I was kind of getting my education and I was doing the things that I wanted to do, it's funny because you come out of a formal education and you go, man, I'm going to take on the world and the world is going to be, my oyster. And I didn't necessarily find that to be the case. I found it to be, here's some opportunities for you. But at the same time, it may not be exactly what you want to do. And so what I actually ended up doing is I ended up working for my uncle, who had built a home building and remodeling business. high end, right? So I'm in the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex. There are a few areas like Highland Park and Willow Bend here in this Metroplex that $2 million, $3 million, $6 million homes. And he had built a really good business going in and re-envisioning how these people would improve their spaces. Super great at that. And he needed a project manager. And so that was actually kind of my first foray into learning some of the concepts that I still apply today. So sales and project management and organization and all of those things. And so to kind of shorten the story up a little bit, I always, though, had this aspiration of being in a corporate environment, right? There was something about commerce and really kind of being involved in being around people in an office and all of that stuff that was just very exciting to me. And I had always thought that I would, based on feedback that I got from people and in conversations I had with people who were in the professional workforce, I had always thought that I would end up in the marketing space and just had never really found my opportunity to break in. So my sister, who was in the recruiting industry at the time, she was 100% recruiter, would go out, find her own companies to kind of fill positions for and those kind of things. Happened upon actually one of the first companies on my professional resume. And they didn't end up using her for the recruiting, but they had taken her on a tour and basically kind of given her the ins and outs. And so she called me, she said, "Hey, we got to have lunch today. I need to pass along a business card to you. This is your chance, right? This is the way that you're going to get the opportunity to break into the marketing industry." And so sure enough, kind of like they say, the rest is history. And so we had lunch. She passed me a business card. I reached out to them. They were actually going to be staffing for a number of positions. I got in and I actually spent 9 years at that first company, really learning the ins and outs of the marketing industry, really learning the mechanics and kind of the principles of sales, starting to kind of hone my own personal craft from a sales perspective. But as you might imagine, 9 years at a company, if you're doing it right, you're advancing within your levels of responsibility and the people that you manage and all of those things. And so I rose through the ranks of that company and really started to understand the idea of high performance and how to become a high performer and how to build high performing teams, whether that be sales and marketing teams. And so really that was the foundation for a lot of the success I have today was really just that first break that I was given for someone to take a chance on me when I had no real professional experience in an office or in marketing. And they really kind of showed me the ropes and taught me the way.
Well, that's awesome. Just recently here, actually yesterday, I just recorded a short little episode of our extras portion of my show talking about showing up for yourself, right?
Yeah.
And it sounds like that's exactly what you did. You showed up, you made that first step, you put in the work, and 20 some years later, here you are. So,
and I mean, that's the hard part, right? And I mean, as we kind of take a blip or kind of fast forward for a second over to what I'm currently doing today, it's my first foray into actually being an entrepreneur for myself. Right. So I have helped a lot of other people, like we were talking about, build dreams, build their business. Right. Like I've developed strategies for companies that have generated hundreds of millions of dollars. Right. Like I'm not bragging about that aspect of it. I'm just saying like that was the job. And I did and do that extremely well. But like when it's your own thing, when you're an entrepreneur or a solopreneur, it's hard. Right? Like it's one thing to, I don't know, I guess I'll call it the safety net. It's one thing to have a safety net of a support structure of a company, whether that be your supervisors and the CEO and these other individuals that you kind of collaborate with, or just the idea that you're going to continue to receive a paycheck for an extended period of time, in one way or another, regardless of whether you're great at your job or not, right? Like if you suck at your job, you're eventually going to get fired. But there's this gap here where as you're trying to figure things out, you're getting paid. When you're an entrepreneur, that is not the case, right? Like
Right.
the bacon making it to the table lives and dies with how you invest in your business and the work that you put in. 100% of what you get is what you give.
Yeah, and that's again, hit the nail on the head there for like my experiences. I've done the corporate thing. I had some jobs and everything that I really enjoyed doing that, but that safety net, I think, almost for me anyway, it put me in a really bad position of complacency. Right?
Yeah.
It's like I can kind of skate by for quite a while before anyone really notices, and it's going to be fine, right? You can still put the bread on the table, but at some point that doesn't fulfill me anymore. You lose that sense of purpose at some point with that. So yeah, no, going off on your own is definitely, I think anyway, is the right way to go if you have the ability to.
I was in a conversation with someone yesterday, and this stuck out to me just a second ago is relevant, right? So we were having a conversation about ideas and idea share, and a question was asked about the corporate environment and basically like fostering good ideas and ultimately the difference between participating in an idea or a project versus basically seeing a project from start to completion, like all the way through, right? And what kind of resonated here was the fact that it's one thing to basically be a part of the soup, right? So, hey, we are going to undertake a project to grow our revenue by 50%. And we're going to take all of these ideas and we're going to mix them up. And then, someone above you or outside of you is basically going to create the roadmap, right? And in doing that, I mean, I certainly think that there's some aspect of fulfillment that comes from just being a part of that process, having your ideas heard and considered and those kind of things. But then what I have also found across my entire career is that when you're not the person pulling the strings and your idea is just one of many, and maybe they take a part of your idea or whatever, there's always this thing in the back of your mind that goes, well, yeah, but what if they had taken the whole idea? What if I had gotten the opportunity to see it all the way through, right? Or getting to be able to kind of like what I explained to this person yesterday was like turning the dials, right? So like, hey, I've provided the idea and they go, okay, great, we're going to run with it. And kind of, so the difference there, I think, is that when you're an entrepreneur, when you're kind of doing your own thing, there is a lot more fulfillment in the ability to basically be able to be the puppet master and to be able to kind of see those things all the way through. The experience that you have with something not working allows you to personally then go, okay, how would I fix this? How would I adjust this? Right? Like, how can we pivot just a little bit? And I'll have to say that like the celebration when you make that micro adjustment and something actually goes the way that you thought it could, man, that's amazing when it's your own thing.
Oh yeah, for sure. And that is the reason why I'm going the path I am, and probably the way reason why you're going the path you are too. And I think a lot of entrepreneurs is like, that I know I can do better than what I'm seeing is a lot of it, has been for me anyways. So then you make that difficult decision to go out and actually do that and prove to yourself and maybe the world and whatever else, like, yeah, I can do it better. So here I am, right?
Yeah.
Or crash and burn.
Yeah. No, I mean, you're right. And I think that part of the reason that I gravitated a little bit to do what I'm doing right now is because I felt and still feel, I guess I should not use it past tense. I still feel like I have knowledge and ideas to share with companies that can benefit from that, right? So one of the scenarios that I've run into in the past, and obviously ran into not so long ago, is the fact that when you're in a corporate setting and you are working for agencies, which is marketing agencies, is who I work for. The name of the game in a lot of instances is really finding brands and companies that will generate the most juice with a single squeeze, right? So finding companies that'll generate the most revenue for you with the least amount of overhead expenditure, right? And so in doing that, you end up kind of carving a niche. And in carving that niche, you kind of end up creating a box. And that box is a real defined universe of, maybe it's companies of a certain annual revenue size. Maybe it's companies with a certain floor of you have to have at least this many locations on the ground, that kind of thing. And it doesn't matter in a lot of instances whether or not the solutions that your company provides are actually a fit for people outside of what's been defined as the ideal customer profile, right? The reality of it is that you can't necessarily service everybody. And so for me personally, I found myself in a situation where I realized the services that we and that I was providing, and the advice that we had for companies and the way that we supported them and the success that we helped a lot of these larger companies to see was something that could be applied to companies that weren't quite there yet, right? So whether they're emerging brands, whether they're, companies that are service providers who are looking to maybe break into some of those larger brands, right? Like there's all this knowledge share that could happen. And I just felt like now was the time to be able to kind of connect with those companies and help them to really grow in the way that I've helped larger companies achieve their success.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. And it's so much easier to connect with everybody now,
Yeah.
You started this stuff 20 years ago, you'd have to go and knock on doors and send letters before, I know the internet was around, but not like it is now, and that's
well, and I tell you what, Anthony, there's part of me though that almost wishes that there was a little bit more reliance on that. I don't know if you found this as well, but sometimes digital outreach doesn't necessarily land the same way that walking into a business, shaking a hand, and having a quick conversation would,
Boy, definitely. Yeah. I think people are definitely a little too reliant on the email strategy, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
You still have to have a real conversation with people,
Yeah.
and the real outliers in successful businesses today, especially in the marketing world, seem to be the ones that are doing a good combination of both those things. Doing the outreach digitally, that kind of stuff, and then having a real conversation, even just virtually like this, getting eye to eye with someone. People resonate with that, and it's super important. And the ones that ignore it don't do so well. So,
yeah, no, you're right. I mean, I think that, what I have found over the 20 years that I have been a quote unquote professional, I've found that relationships matter. Right. And what I've seen and experienced myself is people who understand the idea and the mechanics of building a relationship. And I'm not talking about, I'm not even talking about like a romantic relationship. I'm not even talking about like a long-term friendship, right? There's just certain building blocks of any type of relationship that, like, if you understand the aspect of, I'm going to give to you regardless of whether you give to me. It's my job or my pleasure really to be helpful to you in whatever way I can be. And if I'm out there doing that and I'm doing the right thing, whether it's that I met you at a trade show or an event, or maybe we engaged on LinkedIn or something like that, right? Like in whatever capacity that looks like, you start to actually build a relationship with someone in that way, right? Like that's the linchpin to the relationship. That relationship then becomes real or authentic. And as that happens, then it's those relationships that you can then rely on to I don't know, to then kind of further build things together, right? And maybe it's not immediately. I've actually had professional relationships with people. I've got a relationship with a woman by the name of Kristen. I met Kristen at an event. It's probably been 8 years ago now. And she and I are in the same industry. We interface at these events from time to time. We've never been in a position to be able to work together because the fit just hasn't been there yet. But if I reached out to her and needed an introduction to somebody, she would be more than happy to make that for me, right? Like, I guess the point that I'm making is that your ability to do business with someone as a part of that relationship may not happen right away, but that relationship in itself, you never know where it's going to go and what it's going to lead to, and obviously the fingers of that whole thing.
Oh yeah, for sure. And there's so much of that we as professionals or salespeople or whatever you want to call us, we have a lot of control in that long play too, right?
Yep.
How well do you follow up? How well do you nurture?
Yep.
Just send a Christmas card, something, let them know that you haven't forgotten about them, right? Which is, that's something else too that like I see from a lot of the people I've talked to and been involved in companies over the years, like follow up is a lost art.
Yeah.
It definitely seems to be. It's like, okay, well, we're going to say we're not a transactional thing, but once we get your money, we never hear from us again. Well,
yeah, you're touching on, one of the problems that I often see as I come into businesses and look at businesses. You're exactly right. I mean, I think that follow up to some extent is an art, and I guess I overuse this word, I think, but it can't be. I guess maybe it can't be overused. Is authentic follow up, right? So, I think that we live in a world now where there's not very much delayed gratification.
If you're experiencing burnout, whether you've been losing yourself at work or losing yourself in a relationship, our Unlock Your It Factor program is designed for you. You will learn simple, applicable tools to get reconnected and authentically aligned so you can achieve greater success in life. Check it out.
As a parent of a 10-year-old and a 12-year-old, as they were growing up, electronics were becoming more prevalent with kids, and now they have their own iPads and those kind of things. And I won't even go into how we monitor that. But back to the thing, one of the things that was interesting to me is as I'm researching as a parent, the effects of electronics on kids and how much electronics time should you give your kids and all those kind of things that we as parents do. One of the things that has always stuck out to me is the fact that they said, your kid's behavior to some extent is associated with the amount of time that you allow them to spend on small handheld electronics. And the reasoning behind that is because when they are on that electronic, if they push a button, if they touch something, if they tell it to do something, it's going to do it immediately. And the reality is that's not the way that the rest of the world works, right? So back into the business scenario that we were talking about, I think that in today's electronic age, we are not necessarily wired for delayed gratification, right? So what we need to do is understand, I guess, the timing of the things that we're doing and engaging. If we're communicating with a company, I think it's really important to understand what you as a company, what your average sales cycle is, the problems that you address, and the length of time it typically takes you when you're working with a company to solve that problem. How long does it take you to get a company to go, yeah, that problem is a problem that we have, and we definitely need to use your services? And then once you kind of understand that average timeline, you can start to kind of scale your communication cadence in a way that feels right for that time, right? So if your average sales cycle is 6 months, right? And within 1 week, you're asking somebody to get down to business, right? You're all like, hey, are you ready to go? That's going to feel pretty disingenuous. And they're going to go, man, does this guy even understand how this business operates and how long it's going to take us to actually get all the pieces in place? But if you understand that your sales cycle is 6 months, then you start to approach that scenario a little bit differently. Now, it doesn't mean that things don't off cycle it. They don't offset, right? You may be able to close that opportunity and deal within 3 months, right? But like, it's about how you structure those communications that really make a difference in how that company kind of builds rapport with you and attaches to what you guys offer.
Yeah. Again, preaching to the choir on that, man. Like I've got a sales background myself, and what I used to do most recently before I went full time with my own thing here was I did home improvement sales, like in-house direct sales stuff.
Okay.
Right? And again, I really liked I love the sales process. I love being in that, that bit of relationship building and nurturing, that short time that you're with somebody, that 3 to 4 to 6 hours or whatever it is. I love that process of being able to get people what they need. But one of the things that always drove me nuts about it was that communication stuff you're talking about was almost entirely left on us as the reps in the house.
Yep.
Like there's 5 points of contact before us. Where's the rest of it, And that just drove me crazy most days, because then you look at it, it's like, okay, well, did I do something wrong in what I'm doing in the house to where this didn't lead to a sale or whatever, or was it before me and I have no idea,
Yeah.
And as if you're in sales professionally, you always look at yourself, or you should look at yourself and go, okay, well, I messed this up somehow. But if you don't have data to really back that up, it's really hard to jump on that and fix something, right?
Yeah.
So, and that communication cycle is huge in that.
I'm a firm believer in no matter what stage your business is in, if you're going to call it a business, then you need to operate it like a business, right? And I say that from the perspective of I firmly respect the side hustle and the side gig and all of that stuff, right? So I'm not saying that if you have a business or a side gig that that's not a real business. It 100% is. But if you're going to attach the name business to it, whether it's your primary or not, you need to run it like a business. And so the reason I went into that is because having a prospect record, having a customer record, right? Like something where the way that you've outreached to and engaged with that person and the different steps about the process along the way, having one of these kind of like complete customer records is really important. And so I am a believer in, there are so many different options out there now. So many cost-effective options, many of them actually free for the side hustle or side gig or whatever. But you have to have a CRM system in place, even for your side gig, if you're going to call it a business, because I think that's important, right? Is to your point, being able to see what's been done, even if it's just you, right? What did I outreach to them last time? Did they actually open that email? What did they respond? How many times have I called them and they actually haven't answered the phone, right? Like, am I seeing any traction with this, or am I just kind of beating a dead horse, right? Like those kind of things. Being able to actually zoom out and look at that stuff really makes a difference in how you approach maybe not even just that person, but the next one.
Yeah, definitely. Data is king. You come from marketing, you know that. Marketing does not work without data. You have to have it.
Absolutely, man.
Long gone are the days where it was all done in large batch stuff like the Mad Men, that show, right? Where it's like, okay, well, we know that there are 20 million people that watch television every evening on the 3 channels available, and we know we put an ad up, they're going to, probably 18 million are to see that ad. And then they can extrapolate from there. That's gone now. There's more than 3 channels. No one's watching TV anymore. We got 1,000 things on the internet all the time. So you've got to have some way to track that stuff. And the CRM, I 100% agree with you, is incredibly important in that. And a lot of people don't even know what that is. You know, like you say CRM, and some people are like, what is that? Right? They probably use one, but they have no idea what to call.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's a good point, right? So maybe some of your listeners don't know that, right? So a CRM is a customer relationship management system, right? That's the C, the R, and the M. This is not endorsed or sponsored in any way, but I have always been a really big fan of HubSpot. HubSpot is one of those companies that, from a marketing perspective, has actually really done a very nice job of creating real resources for people, like just from a content perspective. And it's a whole other conversation that I guess we could go into, but HubSpot's sales strategy is actually a warm lead strategy, and they actually bring people into their funnel from content, right? So they're a content powerhouse. They're producing blogs and white papers and case studies and free tools and trackers and all these different kind of things. And like real ones, right? Like ones that like you're not going to provide them your email address and then all of a sudden you're like, man, I can't believe I gave up my personal info for this, right? Like it's really good stuff. And so the reason I mentioned HubSpot is because they actually have one of the most robust CRMs. And as an enterprise company, you can spend thousands upon thousands of dollars on HubSpot, but they provide you a version of their CRM for free. They don't require you to input any credit card data, none of that stuff. And it's surprisingly a really great CRM. So even if you're just one of these people who is running a business, you've never had a CRM before, you're curious about what it is and how it might benefit you, but you don't want any obligation or any additional emails coming into your inbox,
Right.
check it out. Go over there and kind of, sign up for a free HubSpot. It's all web enabled. So you can just open it up in your browser and kind of get to looking and really start to kind of figure out whether or not that's the next step for you.
Yeah, no, and I've used HubSpot stuff in the past. It's fantastic. I'm going to do a little bit of a shameless plug for my own stuff here. We offer a free CRM for all of our clients as well. And I took that idea from what HubSpot does, because it's like, the back end for it really doesn't cost much for overhead as a business to get set up. Implementation for it really isn't. If you know the right people and the right systems, it's not that difficult to do. So we figured, okay, well, anyone that comes into our ecosystem, we'll offer them a CRM as kind of like a thank you and here's a way to track all this great new business you're going to do through us. And it's a really solid model, and that kind of brings up the content. You talked about them being a content powerhouse, and they absolutely are. They got the HubSpot podcast network and all that stuff. With, I'm forgetting the name of the podcast, but Kieran Flanagan and that other guy he's with, they were both from HubSpot at some point.
Yeah.
I listen to that podcast often because they're very insightful. I think one of them is like CMO for Zapier now or something like that.
Yeah.
We got a lot of really good insights into what's happening in marketing world now, right? They do bi-weekly, I think. And where you get that information from, of course, like any information, is super important, right? I was thinking earlier, you're talking about, watching, like going through the motions and kind of seeing how you might do something differently, right? You can watch Michael Phelps on TV win, Olympic gold, and you can get a pretty good idea about how to swim, right?
Yeah.
But you got to put a lot of work in to get to the level he's at, to be an excellent swimmer, and all the sitting on the sidelines and watching and thinking and pondering that too many people are stuck in, I think is holding a lot of things back, holding back a lot of great ideas, So what would you, to people that are sitting there in that position right now, like just kind of doing the thinking and pondering stage, what would you suggest to them to make that first step forward into executing on their idea?
Yeah. So, I'll even share some personal experience on this. So, I think for any idea that you believe is great, you should be willing to invest a certain amount of time in it. And I think the time that you invest is different for every idea, but at a minimum, you should be willing to invest the time to build yourself a business plan to determine whether or not it's really viable, right? And I say that from the perspective of if that seems like a really daunting task to you, it doesn't mean you don't have a good idea. It just means that maybe you're not ready to act on it yet, right? But if you're willing to kind of take the time and to build out a case for your idea, to build out a business plan, then I think that's really going to help you to understand whether or not you can put legs to it, right? And it's one of those things that personally, as I was kind of considering what I was going to do with my business, I went, okay, okay, so transparently, my initial thought, and here's the funny thing, Anthony, I had this thought 3 years ago, right? So pandemic comes, I'm working for a really great company. I actually had been provided the opportunity to come out to a company and build a vertical sales division for them. And everything was going really great. We were seeing a lot of success. The company provided products to the commercial office space. Okay. And, $70 million company, $1 billion industry. And what happened was the pandemic came in, right? About 70% of our business as a company was in the commercial office space. And so I found myself 3 years ago getting laid off from a company like many people did as a part of the pandemic, because the industry that we were in and the work that we were doing kind of vanished overnight, right? And so from that perspective, I had this idea. I said, man, it was actually the first time that I had ever been laid off by any company. It's the first time I'd experienced that. And it was a lonely feeling. There was a lot of uncertainty. Even on top of the uncertainty of what's going on with this pandemic and COVID and all that kind of stuff, like there was the added uncertainty of, man, how am I going to provide for my family? Because I'm the primary breadwinner in our house and always have been, and really like being in that position. And I was like, man, this is crazy. And so I had this idea at that time. I said, hey, you know what you should do? You should take this time to stand up your own thing, right? You should build, a consulting, or you should, build a coaching business or something, right? I had that idea, and I passed on it, right? And part of it was I wasn't ready at that time. So then, here comes, 3 years later, I find myself in a thought process around, yeah, man, you should do it. And the difference maker for me was, like I just said, I said, okay, let's kind of write up a business plan and let's see what this might look like. And what was interesting for me is once I kind of wrote up that business plan, I went, yeah, this is cool. And I would do this and I would do that. And here's kind of what this would look like and those kind of things. And then after having written that, it inspired me to then go and kind of create the assets I needed to be, I guess, more professional with my craft, right? And so we don't have to go too far into it, but like once I had that business plan, I then went, okay, there's a lot of people out there who are consulting and doing those kind of things, and basically they never build a website. They've got, potentially a business card or an electronic business card, and they call their business their name and so on and so forth. And I was like, I want to do something different, because I'm talking to people and I'm saying, hey, let me help you build your brand. Let me help you. I'm going to come in and I'm going to figure out your marketing strategy, and I'm going to be your fractional CMO and all these different kind of things. I'm like, I can imagine if I was a person who is going to use you, that I would expect to be able to see not only examples of your work that you could provide, maybe that you did for other people, but like, how are you branding yourself? And how are you marketing yourself and all of those kind of things? So building that business plan inspired me to then like stand up my website and build out the social media channels that I have and those kind of things, right? So I mentioned that to say that sometimes that first step, that business plan step is actually what inspires you, seeing it on paper, to then go out and build the next thing that you need.
Yeah, I would agree with you. You know, I'm kind of the same. I've had this idea for what there's been a lot of different versions of it, of course, right? But I've had this idea about what we're doing here now for quite a while. And it took writing some goals down to really say, okay, well, that's achievable. That's a little pie in the sky, you know, those kind of things. And then that really kind of just led me down the rabbit hole of how does this work? And you get to a point, it's like, hey, what I ended up doing was saying, I want to be here, you know, point Z. I had to reverse engineer that to get back to where I am, right? So, yep. And that worked out really well, which is really what a business plan is meant to be, you know, figure out how do you get it from where you are to where you're going. And of course, you have to be able to adapt that as time goes on, because, you know, best laid plans of mice and men and all that, right?
Yeah. No, you're exactly right. I mean, I think that, you know, the best comparison that I'll make that's a little visual is like building a business is really like building something out of Lego, right? And so, you know, when you do that, you know, maybe you're building a Lego castle and you decide that you don't want flags on the top of the turrets, right? Or, you know, maybe you want the wall to be 4 bricks bigger or whatever, right? So it doesn't mean it's not modular and adjustable. To your point, it's one of those things where you go, hey, I've got this plan and this is what it's supposed to look like. And then you go, you know, what would look even cooler is this, right? Or, you know, what would be even cooler is this. And it's definitely the right starting point. It's also a great way to be able to look back at how far you've come. So, you know, the last company that I was with, I worked for 3 years. I was a member of the executive team. We had a small but mighty 3-person executive team. And we had this really unique opportunity to put our stamp on a company that had been around for, at the time that we started to lead it, had been around probably about 21, 22 years or so. By the choice of the founders, that company had really grown through referral almost exclusively, and kind of had flown under the radar. And I mentioned that to say that you know, the company then takes on private equity ownership, which was an amazing part of the story. And you know, they said, hey, we need to modernize this a little bit. You know, we need you guys to put your stamp and mark on it. And so, you know, what I found was that when we took the steps to go, okay, how are we going to expand this? What are we going to do? What do we want it to be? How do we want it to look and feel? And what do we want to be known for? And what are we already known for? When we were going through all that work in the beginning, one of the exercises that we commonly went through with our owners was the quarterly board meeting. And then, you know, towards the end of the year, you would start to plan for the next year. And a part of that exercise is essentially communicating to the owners who, you know, the idea of private equity is that ultimately they've built a fund and that fund is invested in by private investors. So they, as an ownership group, are accountable to those people that provided those funds, right? And so one of the interesting parts of that was basically going, hey, what have you guys accomplished this year, right? Because we need to communicate that outwards. And so having kind of those plans and that foundation allowed for us to really look back at, what did we say we were going to do? What did we do? How much did we achieve? And it's just a really neat boost that you get when you can look at how far you've come through a process like that, whether it's in a month, in 6 months, in a year. being able to kind of benchmark yourself against what you said you were going to do is a valuable part of growing any business.
Oh, yes. Again, you keep hitting it all on the head, man. That's awesome. In my past endeavors, my biggest mistake was not having a solid plan and not knowing where I was in a given moment. You know, and I was in quote unquote easy industries like lawn care, maintenance, that kind of stuff, and not well served market and that kind of stuff. So there's room to do it, but I didn't keep track of my money very well, so it didn't matter.
Yeah.
You gotta know where you're at all times. So you mentioned about branding and marketing appropriately to have that proper image, right?
Yeah.
You can look at the powerhouses of branding, like Nike, for example. Seth Godin, actually, I heard him a while back make a comment about if you're not sure of your brand, think of Nike, because Nike's a really good example of this. If Nike decided to open a chain of hotels tomorrow, you'd have a pretty good idea what that would look like. But if Hilton decided to start a shoe line, you'd have no clue, right? And I think that sums it up very well. It's like, what Nike's all about. You see the swoosh, you know what they do. Hilton, well, they're in the hotel industry and they're in the race to the bottom for everything, for price wise and whatever. So you really have to
I'm a Marriott guy anyway, so
yeah. Hey, nice places. And actually, they do branding pretty well. So but I thought that was a really interesting perspective on it about to get someone to really wrap their head around what a brand actually is, right? It's not a logo. It's not like even who or what you are. It's the feeling that people get when they see you, right? Or experience what you have experienced. So what really what came to mind immediately was in the movie, the more recent Jordan Belfort thing, The Wolf of Wall Street, right?
Yeah.
Love that movie. Fantastic movie. But when he unveils the logo for the new big thing with the penny stocks, where there was like Oakford Stratmont or something like that. Like, what does it even mean? It's like, doesn't matter. It's powerful, right? Well, he's not wrong,
Yeah.
So that I think that really resonated with me, because I'm not a marketing expert anywhere near on the level you are, but I really do appreciate the art of marketing. Yeah. And it's one of those things that I put a lot of attention into, and it's nice to hear that I'm not crazy,
Yeah. No, you're not. And I mean, you're spot on. I mean, that is brand, right? Like, brand is how you make somebody feel, right? And there are examples of that all across the board. And there are even successful businesses that make you feel some type of way, and maybe it's a little negative, but they still end up being really successful, right? And they've owned it and they've embraced it. I think that that's one of the important things as you start to build something, and it's something that really you should look at and do in the very beginning, right? And I say that from the perspective of, it doesn't necessarily have to be that you have it all figured out, but you do need certain core things to make sure that what you think you're going to make people feel is what you're going to make them feel, right? So, we'll go into it like this. So when I sit down with any new company, I say, okay, how would you describe your company? Right. And so, they'll talk to me and they'll tell me all of these whiz bang things. We are the premier, this, that, and the other. And, we do this much faster. And, we can help somebody grow like this, and all these different kind of things. No matter what the business is, they've got these, they've got these, I don't want to call it a tagline, because a tagline is like a legitimate thing, but like, they've got all these little buzzy phrases that they say about their business. And like, that's how they think about it. And that's how they feel about it. Okay, cool. Pull your best 3 or 4 customers, right? People that you have an amazing relationship with, who would love to help you and will not judge you as it relates to building your business. Or talk to the account managers that you have within your organization who manage those clients, and what would they say, about your business. And I say that from the perspective of, I'm not even really wanting them to get a testimonial from that company in any way. Sometimes we'll turn the question and we'll go, hey, so why don't you ask your client or have the account manager communicate with them and see what would they say about how you've helped their business, right? Like, how do you help them? What do they rely on you for, right? Like, and oftentimes when you're going through that exercise, what you find is it's not to say that the things that you think about your business are not true. They are probably 100% true, but those are not necessarily the things that resonate with your target customer. And so there's an exercise that we go through where we kind of pick and choose some of those things. You know, anybody who's a founder or owner or executive at a company, they are going to have a certain feeling and a certain sense of pride that they take in those things that they told, right? Those things that they said to me. And so you have to pick and choose some of those things because that's how they're going to get impassioned about when they're talking about their company, right? And then what we're going to do is we're going to mix in some of those things that their customers said about the problems they address, the challenges that they solve, how they can rely on that company within specific situations. And somewhere in between those things, right, becomes your unique selling proposition, right? So this is who we are, this is what we do, and this is how we do it different than everybody else does, right? And I mean, when you start to look at businesses that way, you'll start to be able to then identify that as you look at brands that you frequent on a regular basis, right? Sometimes that unique selling proposition becomes their slogan or their motto, right? So we'll continue on with the Nike example. Nike's slogan of "Just Do It." The idea around that slogan is you don't need to prepare to be out in the world getting physical. You just need to do it, right? Yeah. And then to Nike's credit, right? All it takes is a pair of shoes. I don't care what you're doing, right? Maybe that pair of shoes is walking you out the door to go to the store to buy your boxing equipment because you want to be a boxer, right? Like maybe that pair of shoes is actually the only thing that you need to go out and take that run that you have been saying you're going to take, right? Like the "just do it" thing is part of their unique selling proposition, which is, hey, you don't need to prepare to go do, just do. Right. And so anyways, I just think it's an interesting exercise to go through. And out of that unique selling proposition and that exercise that we go through, you then really start to find your brand's voice. Right. And when you find your brand's voice, the number one piece of advice that I would give to anybody is don't try to copy somebody else's brand voice. You know, if there are other individuals within your industry, in your space, and they're doing something and you go, well, we do XYZ better than them, but I really like the way they talk about themselves. If that is not authentic to who you are, it doesn't matter how great they are. It doesn't matter how successful they are with their, you know, their brand voice and the things that they're saying. If it doesn't align with who you are as a company, it's not going to work the same for you, right? So the next thing that we'll go through and the next thing that any company should consider is, okay, now that we understand what we're saying, how are we going to say it, right? Like, and how, you know, because if you can't align on that, if you can't land on that and know that like default mode, someone wakes you up at 2:00 in the morning and says, hey, Jim, I really need to ask you a question about ABC company. And you couldn't recite whatever in the way that you would normally say it. Cause that's what brand voice is, man. It's like the default, right? Then, you know, you're going to struggle to connect because people's BS meter is going to go off.
Oh yeah, definitely. Especially, you know, in the modern day where, you know, like that kind of the BS meter gets me thinking a little bit more about the sales stuff too. Is like people are so much more aware of what sales processes are. right? Than they ever have been before. If you were to go, back in the day when like door-to-door encyclopedia salesman was a thing, right? That guy would get crucified on the street today, right? Because people are so aware of what he's doing now,
Yep.
That's probably a whole different conversation as far as like the sales stuff is concerned. But the same thing holds with marketing and branding and brand voice too. Is like people know what this stuff is now because it's just in everyone's faces all the time about how to do it, not just people's brands, but like how to actually be that thing and to do it correctly. So that is definitely an interesting conversation I'd love to have at some point. About how to combat sales and marketing resistance, because that's a very real thing that is growing. So.
Yeah, so I've gone through some different workshops in the past, and I've even led offshoots of some of these different workshops where I think when you ask somebody, are you a salesperson? They almost shy away from the fact that they're in sales, right? And part of that comes from the fact that sales has just gotten a bad rap over the years because of people who don't necessarily sell authentically. And I mean, like, used car salesmen, mattress salesmen, right? Door-to-door salesmen, encyclopedia salesmen, security salesmen, right? Like, and I am not bashing any of those guys whatsoever. As a matter of fact, those guys who are doing that in those industries, they have got a tough nut to crack, because there are these preconceived notions about the type of salesperson that they might be. And that couldn't probably be further from the truth for some of these guys, right? So anyways, that being said, there's all these preconceived notions about salespeople. And I think that the one thing that I'll say that kind of, I don't know, underpins that conversation is the best way to sell is actually to not sell at all, right?
Absolutely.
The best way to sell is really, it's consultative, it's prescriptive, right? So if I offer a solution and my solution is the best fit for companies who have these 3 characteristics, and if you don't have at least 2 of those 3 characteristics, then our solution is not going to work for you. My approach as a salesperson should really be to have a conversation with you to identify whether or not any of those 3 things are a challenge within your business. And if I can check the boxes on at least 2 of those 3 things, then I can be prescriptive in that conversation to say, hey, look, if you look at A customer, B customer, C customer, not surprisingly, they have the exact same challenges that you do. And here is how we are currently working with them to solve those challenges. Understanding and knowing that is now, kind of a good time for us to go into a conversation about how we can do the same thing for you, right? Like, that's not a, hey, sign on the dotted line, got to have you here today. Definitely, trying to fit a square peg in a round hole. Right. So when you can take that approach from a sales perspective, it feels a lot better for them. And quite honestly, it's going to feel a lot better for you as the person who is trying to generate that sale.
Oh yeah. And it's going to get them the result they're actually looking for, And
yeah.
What I was told early on in my sales career was, if you're doing it from a consultative basis and you're doing your fact finding correctly, and you are building your value the way you should based on what you find in your fact finding, then when you ask for the sale at the end of that process, however long that is, you already know the answer, right?
Yep.
And if it's not what you expected, you messed up somewhere, or someone didn't say something true along the way, right?
Yeah.
Because sometimes people aren't very honest either, but can't always get around that. So,
Yeah. And I mean, so in any sales conversation that I've had, I don't know, in the past 15 years, in any sales conversation that I've had, I do a few things. Number one, it's been a while until recently, obviously, that I've actually had to source my own conversations, right? So a lot of times I have built a team of sales development representatives and coached them and taught them how to kind of enter into conversations with people to determine whether or not at a high level they may be a fit for what we do, right? But notwithstanding, what I would say is in any sales conversation that I'm going to have, that conversation is probably at least a half hour long, right? Where we're going to have this get to know you. Hey, Billy on my team told me that these are a couple of challenges that you face. Let's dive into that kind of thing. And I have to tell you that probably 15 minutes, if not 20 minutes of that conversation that we're having is actually time where I want them to talk. And I'm going to be listening to the information that they're giving me so that I then can prescribe a solution for that problem within the last 10 minutes of the call. And, you know, it's different for different types of sales. Maybe you've got a shorter, it's a one call close type sales scenario and those kind of things. But the advice still stands, right? Is that if you spend the first part of the call listening, you then have the information you need on the last part of the call to really connect the dots.
Yes. Again, dude, man, this is, I could just let you talk forever. No, that's awesome. And that is something I know that, especially like, you know, newer, younger in the profession, like salespeople definitely need to hear that kind of thing more often. And I know that from experience, because a lot of times you end up in situations like going in to be a used car salesman or whatever, right? And you end up with that grizzled old veteran that's been there for 40 years and just does it the old way, where it's just really shady. And you're learning from that. And it's like, okay, this isn't working. And you start to wonder why. So, you know, hearing advice like what you just talked about is going to be hopefully impactful on someone in that position, right? It's like, there's got to be a better way.
These poor used car salesmen, by the way, if there's any used car salesmen listening, this is not the viewpoint of Anthony or I, right? We love you guys and we want you to be successful. But yeah, it's tough. And you know, it's funny. And I can't call out the creator because I can't put my finger on the name. But you know, I'm a digester of short form content. So whether it's TikTok or it's Instagram Reels or whatever, and there's a creator, and this guy reenacts or plays out car sales scenarios, and he's the funniest. You know, I think he's at a Lincoln dealership, if that helps kind of close the gap for someone to find him. But anyways, it's one of those things where he plays out every one of the scenarios that we have in our head about what it's like to walk into a car dealership and how, you know, these car salesmen and car dealerships treat their customers. And this guy is the car salesman, but the guy on the other side of the camera is actually playing the car salesman and he's playing the customer. And I suspect that these are all things that he's actually seen play out personally, right? Yeah. And it's the funniest thing. So sorry, car salesman, you guys get a bad rap, but I've actually had pretty good experiences buying a car.
I always have too. But you know, like you said earlier, like they get that bad rap because there are so many bad actors in every industry, right? Yeah. And then people have just gotten really tired of being sold on things. People want to buy stuff, but people don't like being sold.
Yep.
You know? So there's a better way to do it than just hammering it home, you know. And
yeah, you're exactly right. And I guess what I would tell any company who's listening, who is saying, man, that sounds like crap. I'll take any sale I can get. Totally get it. That's your prerogative. Totally fine. But what I will tell you is that customer that was, you know, in a way kind of strong-armed into your company, number one, is probably not the ideal fit for you. Number two, you're going to have to work twice as hard to keep that customer. And number three, no matter how hard you work to keep that customer, unless something fundamentally changes about the solutions that you provide, you're probably not going to be able to keep that customer happy forever. Right.
Right.
And so, as a young salesperson, it was really hard, to learn that, right? That not every sale was the right sale for me or for us, and I was young and dumb and motivated by commission. And it's just like, I'm seeing dollar signs. And I would say that I'm pretty appreciative, although I wasn't, I don't think at the time, of some of the leadership above me who said, hey, let's walk through how that customer would actually, fit into our organization. Giving me the opportunity to kind of see in a number of instances, hey, we don't do that. And we don't do that well. And, I may get the initial commission hit on that, but at the same time, there's a possibility of a clawback on the second piece of the commission. There's a possibility that once we do have a solution, a publication, a marketing avenue, whatever it was at the time, for that customer, I'm not going to be able to reach out to them and cross-sell them that, because they're going to be super dissatisfied with the first sale that happened, right? So there were all these different scenarios where, like, you just have to think, right? Making a sale is tough. Keeping a sale is a little bit easier when it's the right fit. And then cross-selling and upselling same time is easier, right? As long as you've got the customer in good standing. And so, you got to be thinking a little bit beyond the first sale. And when you find customers and when you're selling to customers that are the right fit for your business, there's a lot better growth path for a company like that.
Yeah, for sure. I found in my experience early on that the any sale will do mentality, yeah, it pays the bills, right? Which is important. You got to take care of yourself and all that kind of thing. But at the end of the day, where it comes from, at least what I noticed for myself, was either it came from a place of fear, or at the very least, a place of lack of confidence in your ability,
Yep.
right? Or your product, or wherever that confidence is, faltering somewhere. So yeah, there's a lot of that's a whole other episode, probably, in conversation.
I'm telling you, man. Yeah, we could go off on that for a while.
I'm looking forward to that sometime. I think we'll have to have you back at some point and have that conversation. I think that'd be really fun.
I would love that, man.
So, I mean, it sounds like, you're able to help a lot of people with a lot of things. You're pretty well versed in a wide array of things from your experience, and it's awesome that there's people like you out there, doing what you're doing, helping people get through those kind of murky waters sometimes, right?
Yep.
And a lot of unknowns in business. There always are. And if you got someone that's, got 20 some years experience doing these things, then you can kind of guide around the obstacles. So that's awesome that you're out there doing that. Getting towards the end of it here for this, I guess, one of my favorite questions to ask people in general, and it's been really nice on the podcast thing, is I took this idea on podcasts anyways from another podcaster. Okay. But what are 3 books that you would say have really changed your course in life? And you can't say the Bible. That's too easy.
Okay. All right, 3 books. I may have to pull up my Audible too. I'm going to pull up my Audible. I am an Audible listener. So, like, when I tell you I read something, it either A, came off the internet, or B, I read it on Audible, right? But the first one I can give you without going into my Audible. I don't know if you're familiar, or if your listeners are familiar with an author by the name of Jon Acuff.
What is his? He's a redheaded dude, right?
No, gray hair, kind of salty gray hair. He's got a bit of a comedic tone. And so Jon Acuff is a guy that I experienced at a conference a couple of years ago through a company called Right Now Media. He was a keynote speaker at this conference, bunch of powerful dudes getting on stage, sharing stuff for other dudes. Really, really great conference. And anyways, John was there, and he had not long before that keynote had launched a book called Soundtracks. And so that's my first book, is Soundtracks by Jon Acuff. it's an amazing book. And I won't do it justice in describing, but the general synopsis is that as we grow up and go out into the world, there are certain things that we have been told and taught over and over again, right? Whether they're by our parents or teachers or people who are smarter than us or by ourselves, right? Like those kind of things. And those soundtracks live rent free in our brains, right? And when you then go to make a decision, I want to start a business, I want to learn to dance, I want to make $1 million, right? Like whatever the deal is, it's likely that a soundtrack is going to play in your mind that's going to say something to that, right? And so the idea of the book is, number one, understanding that, and then number two, a methodology by which you can change those soundtracks and start creating soundtracks of your own, right? So that is a great book. And so if you haven't already read it, you should definitely check that out.
Okay, is he the All It Takes to the Goal podcast guy? Is that him?
Yes. That
okay.
guy, that same guy. And that's his new book. And I haven't checked that out yet. So we'll give a plug for that because John is awesome. He's super funny. You should follow him on socials. He's doing a really great job on LinkedIn right now, dropping short form content. He's actually created his own company. At least I noticed recently, called, I can't remember what it's called, but anyway, it's like it's like the Idea Company or something like that. And it's CEO of the Idea Company. And he's just, man, he's great. He's awesome. Okay. So the next book that I will recommend is a book called The Unsold Mindset. So this goes to the conversation that we were having about selling. And it really hits the nail on the head for the misrepresentation or connotation that people have about sales. And I was turned on to this book by a friend and former CEO of mine who is not a salesperson at all. She actually is. She'll tell you she's the furthest thing from a salesperson, even though she's really damn good at it, right? And part of the reason that I think that she doesn't consider herself a salesperson is because, well, there's maybe a lot of things, but one of the things is because of this, the connotation around salespeople, right? That is just kind of a part of her mentality and brain. And so she turned me on to this Unsold Mindset. She's a part of a women's executive leadership group called Chief. And the authors of this book had the opportunity to come in and present to these women executives. And she was like, Jason, this book is right up your alley. Check it out. It is by Colin Coggins and Garrett Brown. Okay. Colin Coggins, Garrett Brown, they co-authored The Unsold Mindset. And it is an amazing book where they go through and kind of address some of how you can get past that, right? The idea of sales, how sales isn't about actually selling, that nobody wants to be sold. They actually want to buy, but they want to buy what they need and all of that stuff. So that is actually super great. Let's see. And then, okay, here we go. And then the last one is a book called Sustain Your Game by Alan Stein Jr. So don't forget the junior. That might matter. His dad might actually write books too. Who knows? But it's called Sustain Your Game, and it's by Alan Stein Jr. What I really enjoyed about this book is that there are a lot of sports analogies within this book that relate to how to help you become better in business. And so check that one out too. That's probably the third one I would recommend.
Awesome. I love book recommendations. You know, there's so much we can learn, even from a bad book. I told someone this the other day. Even from a bad book, you can learn something. You know,
Man, and there are so many great books out there, and honestly, like shameless plug for Audible. I actually don't even end up using all my credits every month, but what I really love about that is the ability to get into it, start it, to stop it, whatever. And I really prefer the books that are narrated by the author. I don't like the dry. They paid somebody and he's a professional voice actor guy, reading the book. So that's just my own preference. But yeah, I've really enjoyed being able to, whether it's a part of the commute, whether it's I'm in the middle of my day and I'm stuck thinking about something and I'm like, you know what, step away from this, drop on one of the books and kind of dive back into it. I love doing that a lot.
Right. That reminds me of Hormozy's most recent book here. He did his like YouTube podcast series of him reading the book, right? Just like this is thing, and he did the Audible for it too. And you want to talk about a guy that's passionate about what he does, that dude,
Oh yeah.
Listening to him read his story and his methods and everything, like you really get really fired up.
Now I will tell you, one guy who has done the same thing, and we talked about him, the other day, is Grant Cardone. He's written a number of books. I gotta be honest, man. I love Uncle Grant, but hearing him narrate his own book, I would have preferred somebody else do it, just because he's got such a distinct accent, right? That it for me was like the information in the book was great. Like I loved it, but I don't know, man. I felt like Grant was yelling at me the whole time. You know what I mean?
He's just such an intense man,
Yeah. Yeah. But I tell you what, man, nobody does it better than Grant, quite honestly. Love him or hate him, right? Like he's got his thing. He's got his own brand. And it's funny, just as a side note, he actually put out, I guess he's probably undertaking some different marketing exercises, because I saw a poll that he posted on LinkedIn a couple of weeks ago that just recently closed that said, hey, what is Grant Cardone? When you hear the name Grant Cardone, what is he most known for? And it was something about, author. One of them was 10X. One of them was real estate. One of them was this, that, and the other. And so, here is a guy who is uber successful, about to or in the midst of embarking on a brand exercise to make sure that what he believes is important, his customers are actually resonating with, right? So pretty cool.
Yeah, well, when you got a guy that's outright stated that he wants 7 billion people to know his name, then he better do his marketing correctly,
Yep. 100%. 100%.
That's awesome. I appreciate the book recommendations. I'm sure everybody listening will as well. The last thing I want to ask you, or the last two questions I want to ask you is like, first, what are some things in your business, your life, anything that's coming up soon that you're super excited about?
Yeah. So, we talked about this a little bit the other day, but there is a part of my life and my business which is about inspiring others, right? So outside of just the tactical work and the strategic work with companies to help them kind of grow and realize their dream and be successful and all that kind of stuff, right? That's the advisory and consulting work. But there's an aspect of my professional life and really personal life where I am a high impact corporate speaker, and I have been on stages delivering a signature keynote about high performers, right? And how to be a high performer, how to build high performing teams. It's just a really cool aspect of something that I have been, drawn to, and then now to some extent kind of feel really called to do. And so I've been fortunate to be able to speak to different audiences as a result of companies I had been a part of and my professional background and all those kind of things. And as a part of the exercise that I went through to kind of build out my advisory and consulting business, one of the things that came out of those thought processes was, man, you need to stand up a speaker page and really start to put content out around that and really embrace professional speaking a little bit more. So, TBD, I guess. And I say that not in it's not happening. It is happening, but, follow along for the journey with me, if you will. And watch how that goes, because I'm really excited about it. I think it's going to be super cool in a way for me to impact people in a, number one, a way that I love, but in a very different way from getting into and digging into their businesses.
Okay, awesome. That sounds like pretty exciting stuff. So where can people follow you and find you online and all that?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I am on LinkedIn day in and day out as a business professional. I have built a following on LinkedIn and connect and engage with people on LinkedIn. So you can find me on LinkedIn. Just look for Jason Pierret, Pierret. And I'm the first result that will pop up, right? So you can find me on LinkedIn. If you want to connect with me about your business, couple of ways you can do that. Number one, if you will follow Alpha Brand on LinkedIn, I have a professional page. You can find Alpha Brand through my profile. So follow me, follow the company page. That would be super helpful. I would be so grateful for your follow and your engagement. That would be amazing. I've also got a website, like we talked about just briefly. It is alphabrandadvisory.com. And so if you go to alphabrandadvisory.com, you can jump in the contact form and just put that you heard me here on Anthony's podcast. And I would love you to be able to share anything with me across my socials, on my website, any of that stuff, right? Like anything that you found that was beneficial to you, maybe something you disagreed with, whatever, right? Like I am open to all sorts of feedback, but would really love the opportunity. If you feel like there's something I can do to help your business from a sales and marketing perspective, if you feel like you need a little advisory, or even just want someone to take a look and determine whether or not there's actually a need for someone who does what I do, I would love the opportunity to do that. Engaging with companies is something that really just, I get up in the morning to do it.
Yeah. That's awesome, man. And I'm sure if we get this show out there a little bit more and all that, you'll start to see some people from this. I definitely want to have you back at some point to have just this same 90-minute conversation about the sales stuff.
Yeah.
Because that's one thing it's all over the internet. People talking about sales strategies, this, that, whatever else, but no one really gets into like the how and why of it, as far as I've seen anyways. So,
I would love that because, truth be told, when you come to my socials and when you look at my rise to where I am today, I built my career in sales, and the marketing knowledge that I have is because I built my career in sales in the marketing industry, right? For agencies and those kind of things. And so, value to me in that regard is kind of, I got a 2-for-1, right? I learned a tremendous amount about marketing, but obviously I did it from a sales perspective. And so, I just sales conversations, building high performing teams, figuring out nuances as it relates to sales, man, we may have to schedule 2 90-minute conversations, like, cause I feel like you and I both, 2 sales professionals, man, we might fill 2 podcasts with that stuff, but I love it.
I'm looking forward to that. We'll have to get that scheduled for sure. So I think that's it for this episode. Anyone, listening, get out there and follow Jason at his LinkedIn and alphabrandadvisory.com. Get out there and take a look. Anything else you want to say before we get off the air here?
No, hey, Anthony, thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed this. And you've been such a gracious podcast host, but it's been a lot of fun, man. So thank you for inviting me on the podcast. I look forward to being a part of it again. Happy hunting out there for everybody looking to build their dream.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time as well, Jason. Everyone listening, that's it for the episode. So y'all have a great time. Stay out there, keep crushing it. We'll see you around.
See ya.